doing a lot of changes may confuse people sometimes. Why do you really have to wait for 4 days for this process? Habit can make you really efficient. But over time, it makes you blind. And innovation will not happen. Our job is not to blindly repeat and be in that autopilot, but to question how can we refine things and really grow. Marhaba and how's it going, everyone? And welcome back to Yuwab. I'm your host, Saeed Al-Ghafri. Yuwab is all about giving you the right tools to thrive, not only at work, but also life. Thank you for being with me. And thank you for sharing this episode. And if you are here, it tells me that being resilient, growing, and focus are your main priority. You know, we all love habits. I one time read a book on how to basically stick with a specific habit or changing thing. And the guy was very much quoting or giving examples on how to quit, for example, smoking. God forbid that you don't smoke. But it was all about sticking to a habit and being consistent. Because habits usually teach us being consistent at what we do. So it makes us really good at what we do. It makes everything that we do very much stick. But you reach a point where you become very much robotic. It becomes very much 1 + 1 = 2. Very much. Now, what's really important is that having those habits, because we want that consistency. And you know, when you look at everyone around you, or maybe yourself, you're going to see that habits are everywhere. You will see it at work, you'll see it at home, you're going to see it everywhere in your even any decision that you do. But you're going to see that when you are sticking with the habit, you're not going to get better at what you do. This episode is all about how can I get better? How can I get away from a habit? So stick around because we're just going to talk about one of the things that I enjoy really doing, which is stepping away from the habit and being always outside the box as much as I can. So, question. How many times, and this is something that I used to see a lot, how many times you've asked someone, could be at work, or even someone whom you are, who's very much dear at you. You go to that person, and you're like, why do you do this task or this work the way it is? Why do you do it this way? And the answer usually, and most of the time is, they will be like, because that's the way we've always done it. And they're going to look at you as if you are really a stranger, seriously, or you don't know what you're talking about. Or some of them may tell you, yeah, because my boss told me to do it this way. Or someone may be like, okay, probably he told me how to do it this way. As if they're just throwing the blame or you're criticizing them when you tell them why you do it this way. Now, that answer usually drives me really, really nuts and drive each one of us crazy. You know why? Because when I follow that with a question, I'm like, then what will happen if you change? Like, what will happen if you change doing the task? And you know what would the answer be? In most of the time, even 99%, the answer would be, yeah, we can do it better. Then why don't you do it better? Why don't you change? Now, that doesn't mean like this person is an idiot. No. It just tells you that this person really stopped thinking. They're just there. They're just doing the habit. as if they're following a script. They're just being robotic. And this happens a lot in business where things becomes the status quo and people don't really want to change usually. You know what will happen ultimately, especially in business? Other people will do it better than you. And when that happens, and look back at the history, one day you're going to be out of that market. You're going to lose. And let's be honest, we are all guilty of doing the same thing in our lives. Honestly, we're all guilty. Let me share with you a story. And now, this could be contradicting to today's episode, but again, just to show you the importance of habits. When you basically start a new process or when you want to do something new in a company, it's very important to stick to a script or a process because you want to embed that in people's mind. This is the most important thing. Other than that, forget it. Well, if you want to improve, you need to go basically outside that script. I remember one time, and people know me for being very much challenging the status quo and this and that, but I don't do it too soon. One time, we basically adopted a new process. And, we said, okay, we're going to do this meeting this way. One guy, the next day, changed the way the meeting is done. And I'm like, why did you change it? They're like, yeah, we need to be creative. But that's not really creative. That's basically too soon because you haven't really used the time to judge whether it works or not and what new changes you need to do, because doing a lot of changes may confuse people sometimes. So this is a bit contradicting, but again, you have to manage that when you are in a process and you see that you are reaching a point where it's becoming habit or no change are happening, probably it's time to change to become much more better because you care about being creative and you want to grow. Let me share with you a quote from a famous philosopher. His name is Musonius Rufus. What he said is that in most things, we address circumstances not with the right assumptions, but by following rich habit. The person in training must raise above pleasure, fear, money, and comfort, and choose with reason. Now, you may be wondering, what the hell is this guy saying? In simple terms, he's just saying, don't live on autopilot. Although I love to be sometimes an autopilot, especially in situations where I'm not really in the mood. But again, don't be on an autopilot mood. Because what happens is that you're just going to be reacting, and you don't want that because that will not make you move and that will not move you forward. Sometimes autopilot is amazing because you want to do things safely, consistently, and safely. And we need that. Let's say you want to fly an airplane. You need to basically do it safely. There's no compromise. You can be creative. Imagine you are in an airplane and the pilot is becoming creative. You don't want that. You want to be basically very much sticking to that process. So it's very important to basically follow that. But again, the intent of today's episode is how can we do things better and how can we be creative? Let me share with you a story. I'm very much known to be a person who challenged the status quo. And part of my previous job was to pass by the factory, the plants, meeting people, seeing how's it going with them. And one time I passed by a guy who was doing a task. I stopped. I looked at him and I was observing. Then I approached him. Assalamu alaikum. I was like, alaikum salam. Why? I was like, how's it going? This and that. And after all this, I'm like, what are you doing? He started to explain to me what he's doing with passion. And I was like, can you really do this better? And he was like, sorry, I cannot. And his face expression became someone as if I was insulting him. And I'm like, listen, man, I'm just asking you, can you do this really better? I was like, no, we cannot. And he started giving me explanations. This cannot be done this way. And if we do it this way, it will be this, and this, and that. As if it was really someone really protecting their kids or protecting something. Very simple question. Can you make this better? And look what happened to him. He became very protective. Very protective. Now, I'm like, may I know why are you talking to me this way? And he basically paused. He couldn't really continue. And I'm like, do you know that the other person that I basically passed by, he was doing exactly the same job. And when I asked him, he changed the way within the procedure, okay? Not something crazy or out of the mind. And they are basically achieving a 15% reduction in time. So that's 1 hour. It's a lot of time, by the way. And I'm like, what's really the deal here? And you know what happened? After a lot of back and forth with the guy, he actually adopted that process. And he changed. Very difficult one. And guess what he did? He achieved actually 17%, a 2% increase, which is even better than that other person. So let me throw that challenge to you. Find one thing that you're doing today, out of habit, anything. It could be the way you start your morning when you wake up. It could be that task that you do it in a certain way, or it could be running a meeting, or it could be responding when you're really stressed. You could be shouting or shutting someone down, or maybe you're overworking a specific thing. I just want you to stop and ask yourself, is this really the best way to do it? Now, if you answer this with no, then it's really time for you to rethink. Really, it's really the time for you to rethink. So let me give you this simple, stepwise process that will break out this and will take you away from this trap. Step number 1 is look at your habits. Very important. Look at it. Don't really assume that you know it. Write it down explicitly and ask yourself, why do I do it this way? Seriously, I mean, sometimes when I pass by people, I'm like, why do you do it this way? Can you change? Because sometimes when you get into this autopilot thing, you ignore yourself. But have the habit to say, can I do this better? What's up with this habit? Does this really look better when I do it this way? The more you ask questions, the more you audit, the more it will be better. I remember one time when a long time ago, I was a manager. This is the first time it happens to me. So became a manager. I called for a meeting. I met with my 3 or 4 people who were reporting to me. I'm like, okay, guys, what do you guys used to do? They're like, Saeed, and proudly, Saeed, we're used to have this meeting, and we have this meeting, and we have that. And I'm like, okay, awesome. Let's do it. Let's basically have those meetings. And after 4 weeks, and I think probably 4 or 5 weeks maybe, I met with them. And I'm like, what do you think, guys? Do we really need to basically have these meetings? And they were like, Saeed, probably not. Probably not. It really surprises you when you basically start to ask yourself why. Or I remember, this is classic actually. I remember I asked a question to someone and I was like, why do you really have to wait for 4 days for this process? Because they do something, they wait for 4 days and then they go to the next step. And they're like, yeah, it's very important. It's part of the process. And we have to wait. If we don't wait, it will be a nightmare. So it's important and we need to have it. I'm like, okay, why? Because we need to send confirmations, we need to send reminders, and we need to tell people that, listen, and we need to satisfy that specific requirement. You see what I'm saying? You're basically now seeing why it's important. Why are you doing it? And can you do this better? You're auditing, you're challenging it. Which takes us to the second step. Now, that autopilot behavior, change it to be more with intention. Listen, I'm not asking you to stop the habit here, but shift with intention. Now, remember when you wake up early in the morning, if the first thing that you do is reach out to your phone and checking what's up in the morning, checking your WhatsApp messages or checking this and that, maybe it's better that you replace it with journaling for maybe, I don't know, a couple pages, or maybe having a 5-minute reflections. Your intention should be more like not checking the phone, but probably I need to plan my day better or organize my thought around it. You see how your intention changed? It's not about reaching to the phone and seeing what's up. It's about how can I basically plan my day to be much more better. You do that with intention. Then you're just eventually, day 2, day 3, you're just not going to look at the phone. And you're not going to let your phone override you. Very important. Or let's go back to that, when I met with my team and they told me to have those meetings. You know what happened when I observed people? They were very much looking at their phones and laptops. Their mindset was very much not in the meeting. And then we stopped and we circled around that. And we were like, can we do this better? The intention was not to be basically escaping that meeting, but to be much more creative, to grow, to do things much more better, to be efficient. So maybe we should cancel it. You see how it happens. And that 4 days of wait, if you remember the example I told you, because people were sending confirmations and reminders. And the idea was, how can we be creative around that? Because it was important to send the reminders and get the confirmations. But it's so draining and it's not really efficient. So the intention now is, how can we basically be more creative? And how can we innovate to be much more efficient? So you see, when you flip that autopilot and make it much more intentional, it becomes much more stronger. And this takes me to the last step, which is knowing the why. The why is honestly a very powerful word for me. And it's really the first step when you want to change. It's always important when you have a habit to ask yourself, why? Why is that? Because it always takes you back to the purpose. Because you're just going to be blind in that autopilot mode. And the purpose will be more linked into growth. It could be more linked to clarity, better relationships, or maybe a better health. And that's the most important thing. So if you really don't know the why, the habit will really own you. Let's have a reflection. Think about habit this way. Habit can make you really efficient. But over time, it makes you blind. And innovation will not happen. And you'll be like, I'll do this the same way as it is. While you should be like, how can I do this better? And that's the most important thing. And that's the most important way forward. As leaders, maybe parents or entrepreneurs, our job is not to blindly repeat and be in that autopilot, but to question how can we refine things and really grow. All right? So here is a reminder for you. Don't let your habits run your life. Let your purpose run your habits. Always link it and bring it back to your purpose. All right? If you know someone who is on autopilot, share this episode with them. You really don't know. This may change their life. And thank you for tuning into this episode. Until next time, stay intentional, stay clear, and keep growing. مع السلامة.